Alternatives to traditional camping gear. Hey, my friends. So I have about 10 alternatives here, and this is for those that are on deep budgets, for those that have just started a family and you don't have any extra discretionary funds for specific specialized camping gear. And the thing that I would say first off is to kind of use what you already have. And what you don't have, you can always borrow from others. But if you don't have anybody to borrow from, and you only have certain limited things, then you have to start thinking outside the box. But for most people, you have some of the things that I'm going to mention, and that can be kind of a substitute or an alternative to your mainstream traditional camping gear. The first example would be, instead of a sleeping bag, you could just use a blanket. It could be an old quilt that you have, maybe a blanket that you use for picnics. Any type of covering that can provide, some type of reflective quality to kind of keep heat in, to keep your body temperatures more stable. And I like to even use like some of the military surplus wool blankets. A lot of people have those, but if you don't, sometimes like at yard sales and flea markets, you can get some that are in really good shape for very little money. Tents. If you don't have a tent and you don't know anybody that you can borrow a tent from, you can always use an old tarp or some leftover plastic sheeting from a painting project. And, a lot of times you don't really even need shelter in a lot of these scenarios, especially if you're out only one night or if you're in an environment that has really good weather. It can be very optional, but sometimes it's good to have at least something just in case it starts to rain, and if there's wind that kicks up. So a small lean-to made out of like tarps or plastic sheeting could be an option. Camping backpacks. Now these can get expensive, if you really get into some of these in the higher end stuff. But if you don't have a good backpack, what about your old school book bag? And I know that it's a big trend right now to get those reusable grocery bags that are typically made of like recycled materials. And I would not recommend those grocery bags for like, long hikes or anything. But if you're only going from like the parking lot of like the state forest or the park that you're in, and you're just walking maybe 5 minutes or so to a campground, then, it's not a problem. Or if you're doing like car camping, not a problem. If you're camping out in the backyard, not a problem. And that's what I would say first off too. You want to start out, if you've never gone camping, start out in your backyard. Do that a few times. And then maybe get with some friends or family and maybe go to another site, maybe their house. And then maybe go a little bit further out. Maybe go to like the local park and camp there if it's allowed. And you kind of just move a little bit further and further away from the house and maybe stay out a little bit longer each time. The next alternative would be the standalone, flashlight, headlamp, and lantern. Most people already have those, but if you just don't have any of those, then you can always use the LED light on your cell phone. And most cell phones have lights. I mean, I don't know if any of them don't have that anymore. Like in the last 10 years, all my cell phones have had that. So you can just use what you have. The next option here would be, instead of bringing special freeze-dried camping food, what about the food from your pantry that you already have, that actually is cost effective? And you kind of want to look at items that require little to no prep and that aren't going to be extremely heavy and bulky. But, if you're just car camping or camping in the backyard, it doesn't matter how bulky and how heavy they are. The next is going to be the special inflatable camp pillows. A lot of people said that they can't even sleep without a pillow. So this is kind of a big thing for some people. But on most people's couches and beds, they have typically those small throw pillows. I mean, you could always bring your full-size pillow from your bed, but you can use those throw pillows, or you could just bundle up a few shirts or maybe a jacket or other piece of clothing and use as a pillow as well. I mean, you can get real creative and just take a garbage bag and fill it up with leaves. I've known people doing that before and it works. Special camp mattress pads. You can use an extra blanket instead, a foam or rubber mat from home. And even once again, you can take large garbage bags and fill them up with debris like pine needles and leaves and things like that. The next option would be these special titanium cook sets and having sporks and all this. And that's all very nice and good. I have them myself and they're awesome. But what about just using the pots and pans that you already have in your home to start out with and the utensils you already use? Now, of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be, dragging around really heavy pots and pans if you're hiking a few miles here and there. But if you're just, once again, going very short distances with your bags, then you can just bring whatever you want. The next is specialized collapsible fishing rods. And this one right here can get really expensive, especially if you're looking at carbon fiber and titanium materials and so forth. But you can go real simple. Just use a tree branch for the rod, and you can use just spare wire that's maybe in your garage or shed to make hooks. You can even just use safety pins and make hooks out of those. And then you can use a dental floss. I like to use some of the heavier nylon dental floss that's like waxed for my line. And you can use packing foam. You can cut out pieces for your bobber, and you can even just tie rocks to your line for sinkers or weights. And so it's just an option. What about ferrocerium rods with magnesium bars? That can actually be substituted out with just whatever you use around the house as your main combustion device. A lot of people just typically have a couple boxes of matches, or they have a lighter. Just use what you have. And as a bonus item, what about those camp chairs? There's some really nice, super lightweight camp chairs, and they are kind of desirable. I have one myself, and it is really nice. But are they really needed? Not really. Typically there's a stump, or there's different ways that you can set up and sit on your bags, especially if your bag is just full of clothing or blankets. And you can lean up against a tree. There's all different kind of techniques to be comfortable out when you're camping. And so a chair is very optional. But these are just some examples. I'm sure you have probably a ton of different alternatives as well to add in the comment section. I just want to thank everyone for your ongoing support. Hopefully this was helpful for those that are on a really deep budget, that aren't really able to buy camping gear, but they want to have the experience. And I think it's really awesome when I see young people take out their kids and explore and kind of get out of the rat race of the suburban life or the urban life. And even for those that live in rural areas, I know of a lot of families that live in rural areas, but they just don't really go outside much. They just stay inside the whole time pretty much. And I would invite everyone that lives in any location to get out more and to explore. And it doesn't really require high-end materials or high-end gear. Typically, you can just use what you have, or you can borrow a few items from time to time to kind of get you through. And so, once again, thanks for watching.